He was about 6 feet tall, that he was completely scourged all over his body. He was crucified, and nobody dies for a lie.
Mel Gibson is that actor known for his iconic movie roles, but recently he challenged Joe Rogan's view of Jesus, and what happened next went viral. Although Gibson was the producer of the Passion of the Christ movie, no one expected that his belief in Jesus Christ runs much deeper than what was shown on screen. Surprisingly, it was this strong belief that led him to confront Rogan, and what he said quickly got everyone talking. But what exactly is Rogan's view of Jesus, and why did Mel Gibson challenge it? Join us as we uncover Joe Rogan's view of Jesus that Mel Gibson challenged. What Mel Gibson told Joe Rogan about Jesus. Gibson has recently defended the historical reality of Jesus. Based on Gibson's belief, the reality of Jesus Christ is not something vague or uncertain, but something that can be traced step by step through records preserved over time. From there, he points to something many people overlook, that the Bible as it stands today is a Christ-centered book from beginning to end. To see this clearly, one has to go back to the very beginning, to Genesis, and follow the line carefully as it unfolds. And just when the path starts to become clear, he points out something remarkable about how consistent it is. Let's find out what he was pointing to. The pattern begins in Genesis after the fall of man. After the fall of man, it is recorded that God declared that the seed of the woman would bruise the serpent's head, while the serpent would bruise his heel, as written in the book of Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. In Genesis chapter 22, verse 18, it is written that through Abraham's seed, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. This promise was not limited to Abraham's lifetime, but extended across time, pointing toward one who would fulfill it completely. Moses reinforced this direction, writing in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15, that a prophet would arise from among the people, one like him, and that the people must listen to him. Gibson believes that here the expectation is clearly set. The coming figure is someone with authority and significance beyond the ordinary, a messenger who would guide people according to God's plan. The prophetic books added more precise details. Isaiah, for example, in chapter 7, verse 14, foretold that a virgin would conceive and bear a son, and his name would be called Emmanuel. Later in chapter 53, verses 3 to 5, he described a servant who would be despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, one who would bear the griefs of others, be wounded for their transgressions, and by whose stripes many would be healed. According to Gibson, these prophecies do not merely predict the coming of a figure, they describe the nature of his life, the suffering he would endure, and the redemptive impact he would have. In Gibson's reading, what demands attention is how remarkable it is that such detailed foresight existed centuries before the events themselves took place. But that is not all. Another prophet, Micah, further clarified the expectations. In chapter 5, verse 2, he wrote that from Bethlehem would come a ruler in Israel, whose origins are from ancient times. This prediction identifies not only the person, but also the specific location of Jesus' birth. For Gibson, the precision of this detail is striking. It moves the expectation from a general promise to a verifiable historical event. Across these writings, composed by different authors over generations, the focus remains consistent. Each, as Gibson sees it, contributes a piece of the same overarching narrative. When examining these prophecies together, the coherence becomes even more evident. Despite being written by individuals separated by time, culture, and circumstance, the works align seamlessly, pointing toward one central figure. Gibson believes this is remarkable because many of these writers never met or worked together, yet their writings all point to the same truth. He argued that the matching prophecies and expectations provide strong evidence that Jesus really existed. Turning to the New Testament, Gibson draws attention to how these prophecies find their fulfillment in recorded events. In Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 to 23, it is written that Mary, a virgin, conceived and bore a son, fulfilling Isaiah's prophecy, and that his name was Jesus. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1 records that he was born in Bethlehem in accordance with Micah's prediction. John the Baptist appeared to prepare the way for him, declaring in Matthew chapter 3, verse 11 and John chapter 1, verse 27, that the one coming after him was far greater, and that he was not worthy even to carry his sandals. These details demonstrate a clear alignment between prophecy and fulfillment. showing that the life of Jesus was not an accident of history, but a continuation of a carefully recorded plan. Gibson also pointed out that the events of Jesus' life took place in verifiable locations. Bethlehem, Nazareth, and Jerusalem were not mythical or symbolic settings. They were real historical cities. Archaeological and historical research has confirmed their existence, and these places are still visited by pilgrims today. This connection to physical geography, he argued, reinforces the historical reality of the narrative recorded in Scripture. The places themselves bear witness to the events that transpired, making it possible to trace the life of Jesus in both written and tangible history. External sources further corroborate the historical existence of Jesus. Ancient historians such as Tacitus and Flavius Josephus mentioned him in their writings, including the record of his execution under Pontius Pilate.
But he had no power to order his execution. The only man with both motive and authority to see Jesus dead was Pontius Pilate.
These accounts come from authors outside the Christian tradition without any interest in promoting faith. Yet they verify that Jesus lived, taught, and had a significant impact in first-century Judea. For Gibson, when these sources are considered alongside Scripture, the historical evidence becomes undeniable. The way prophecy, events that happened, places, and independent historical records all fit together makes a strong, layered argument that Jesus really existed. Gibson also draws out the role of John the Baptist to show the historical reality of Jesus. John's life and ministry were extraordinary in themselves, but he repeatedly directed attention away from himself toward Jesus. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 3, verse 11, John declares that someone greater than him is coming. And in John chapter 1, verse 27, he reiterates that he is unworthy even to untie his sandals. These statements show that Jesus had a unique role and that people were expecting him and noticed his coming as it happened. The narrative from Genesis through the prophets to the Gospels reveals a remarkable coherence. The early mention in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, the promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 22, verse 18, the prophecy in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15, the detailed predictions in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, and chapter 53, verses 3 to 5, the specific location in Micah chapter 5, verse 2, and the fulfillment in Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 to 23, chapter 2, verse 1, and the testimony of John the Baptist in Matthew chapter 3, verse 11, and John chapter 1, verse 27, all form a continuous narrative. Gibson points out that this evidence spans many centuries, comes from many different writers in different situations, but still all focuses on Jesus' life and purpose. In conclusion, Gibson shows that there is strong evidence that Jesus really lived. Jesus existed and his life was written about. And both the Bible and history recognize that he lived. But given how Gibson has gone to great lengths to challenge Joe Rogan's take on Jesus' existence, it's no wonder many are eager to see what he uncovered. So what led Gibson to hold this view? Stick around because we're about to reveal some shocking truths you won't want to miss. The real reason Mel Gibson cares about the true story of Jesus. Mel Gibson's interest in the reality of Jesus isn't something sudden or random. It's deeply connected to his life's work, especially his most famous film, The Passion of the Christ. This movie wasn't just another Hollywood production. Mel Gibson didn't simply sign up to direct it, he helped produce it. He co-wrote the script, and he poured his heart into telling what he saw as the true and powerful last hours of Jesus' life. This film was meant to be real and raw, and it showed the world how serious Gibson was about exploring the story of Jesus in a way that felt truthful and meaningful. The Passion of the Christ was released in February 2004. From the very start, it stood out because it wasn't in English. The dialogue was mostly in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew, languages that Jesus and his followers might actually have spoken. Mel Gibson wanted people to feel like they were stepping back in time, not just watching a movie about history. In this film, Jim Caviezel played Jesus. Caviezel wasn't a massive star before this movie, but his performance became unforgettable. He brought a quiet strength and deep emotion to the role, making Jesus' suffering and final moments feel powerful and human. Alongside him were actors like Maya Morgenstern as Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Monica Bellucci as Mary Magdalene. Each actor seemed perfectly cast. Their faces and expressions added weight to every moment of sorrow, hope, and love on screen. When The Passion of the Christ came out, people reacted in big ways. Some called it one of the most moving religious films ever made. Others were shocked by how graphic the violence was. But whether people loved it or criticized it, they couldn't ignore it. The critics were mixed in their reviews, but audiences around the world flocked to see it. The movie also became a financial smash. Made on a relatively modest budget of about $30 million, it went on to gross more than $610 million worldwide. That made it one of the most successful independent films in history and for years, the highest-grossing R-rated movie ever in the United States. Its powerful message and raw storytelling drew a huge crowd, far beyond the typical Christian film audience. But there is more to it. Because the film was independently financed and very much a passion project, details about exactly how much each cast member was paid aren't widely published like in big studio films. However, many people in the industry believe that the actors worked for less than they might have on regular Hollywood blockbusters. This was partly because the movie was a labor of love and partly because Gibson himself was so committed to telling this story that profit came second to faithfulness to the narrative. There's been discussion over the years about how much the cast earned compared to how much the movie made, especially because Caviezel's role was so demanding both physically and emotionally, but official pay figures haven't been publicly confirmed. Exactly why Gibson has such a deep interest in the reality of Jesus may come down to something more personal than just filmmaking. He's spoken about his own spiritual journey and why stories of faith and sacrifice matter to him. This film wasn't just a job, it was a message he wanted to share with the world. Many viewers said that The Passion of the Christ made them think about the Bible in a new way or brought them closer to their own beliefs. For years after the original movie, people talked about the possibility of a sequel. Fans asked, what happened after the crucifixion? What about the resurrection? Initially, it was only talk, rumors, and comments from Gibson and his collaborators over time. One early tease about a follow-up came many years ago when people discussed a possible movie called The Resurrection. Gibson himself once mentioned that a new film about Jesus rising from the dead would be something huge to tackle. Then, more recently, plans really began to take shape. Instead of just one follow-up, Gibson's latest project will actually tell that next part of the story in two separate films.
Here's everything we know about Mel Gibson's upcoming film, The Resurrection of the Christ. So first and foremost, the movie will be broken up into two parts. Part 1 will be released on March 26th, 2027. Part 2 will be released on May 6th, 2027.
These are titled The Resurrection of the Christ, Part 1 and Part 2. The first is scheduled for release on March 26th, 2027, which happens to be Good Friday on the Christian calendar, and the second on May 6th, 2027, which is Ascension Day. This kind of timing shows how much care is being put into connecting the story to its religious context. These new films won't just pick up where the old movie left off, they'll go deeper into the meaning of Jesus' resurrection and explore the events that followed. Because the story of the resurrection and the early spread of Christianity involves a mix of history, belief, and spiritual themes, the screenplay has been described as ambitious and expansive. It is also said that some scenes may include deeper spiritual or symbolic ideas, making the story feel bigger and more detailed than the first movie. One of the big changes with these new films is the cast. Whereas the original starred Jim Caviezel and Monica Bellucci as Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the sequel is recasting many of the main roles. This decision comes because the original actors would need to be significantly aged or digitally altered to fit the story's timeline. And logistically, it became easier to cast new actors for these parts. Filming has already started, with places like Rome being used, helping the movie keep the same old-time and realistic feel as the first one. The budget for these new films is also much larger than the first Passion movie. While The Passion of the Christ was made for about $30 million, each of the new films is said to cost around $100 million, meaning the whole project might be close to $250 million when both parts are finished. That's because Gibson wants to bring bigger visuals, a wider story, and even special effects that weren't part of the first movie. People are already talking about what these films might mean for audiences. Some think that because The Passion of the Christ was such a deep emotional experience for many, the story of the resurrection will hit even harder. Others wonder if modern audiences will respond in the same way now that movie tastes have changed a lot since 2004. Still, the fact that Gibson is putting so much into these films shows that his interest in the reality of Jesus' story, not just the crucifixion but what comes after, remains strong and personal to him.
My contention is, it was like, you're making this film and the idea was that we're all responsible for this, that his sacrifice was for all mankind, and that all our ills and all the things in our fallen nature, it was a redemption, and I believe that.
In the end, what The Passion of the Christ achieved in 2004 was remarkable. With the resurrection of the Christ coming soon in 2 parts, Mel Gibson is moving forward with the story, still trying to show the meaning of Jesus' life, death, and his return in a way he hopes people will understand and connect with. Again, and it's this upcoming movie that pushed Gibson to challenge Joe Rogan on his personal views about the reality of Jesus. But what exactly does Rogan believe? Does he question the story or reject it completely? Stay with us, because what he really thinks might surprise you, and it's a side of him most people have never heard before. The real reason Mel Gibson confronted Joe Rogan about Jesus. Mel Gibson challenged what Joe Rogan believes about Jesus when he appeared on his live show, The Joe Rogan Experience. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It happened on a platform that has slowly become one of the most influential talk shows in the world. Joe Rogan launched The Joe Rogan Experience in 2009, and at the time it was a simple idea: long, open conversations without the pressure of television rules. Before starting the podcast, Rogan was already well known as a stand-up comedian, a television host on Fear Factor, and a commentator for the UFC. He began the podcast casually with his friend Brian Redband, streaming conversations online with little structure or planning. What started as a small project quickly grew as more listeners were drawn to its raw and honest style. Over time, the show expanded massively, eventually securing a major licensing deal with Spotify, which helped it reach an even wider global audience. Today, it is downloaded and watched by millions across different countries, making it one of the most widely consumed podcasts in modern media. Over the years, that freedom became the show's biggest strength. Since then, Rogan has used the podcast to explore almost everything you can think of. He talks about science, health, fitness, politics, history, religion, comedy, business, conspiracy theories, and even strange topics like unidentified flying objects and artificial intelligence. One episode might focus on nutrition and brain health, while the next dives into ancient civilizations or modern warfare. That wide range of topics is what keeps people listening, because the conversations feel real and unpredictable. Because of that style, the show has attracted a long list of powerful and interesting guests. Scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson have come on to explain the universe. Entrepreneurs like Elon Musk have talked about technology and the future. Fighters, comedians, authors, politicians, and even controversial figures have all sat across from Rogan's show. The show has become a place where big ideas are tested openly, sometimes challenged and often debated in a way that traditional media rarely allows. So when Mel Gibson appeared on the show, it wasn't just another interview. It was a meeting between two men with very different ways of looking at life, especially when it comes to faith. Gibson didn't start by arguing. Instead, he began by talking about something personal: his own belief in Jesus Christ. That set the tone for everything that followed. Gibson has never been quiet about his faith, which shaped one of his most famous films. For him, Jesus is not just a historical figure or a moral teacher. He believes Jesus is real, divine, and central to understanding life itself. So when the conversation on Rogan's show moved toward religion and the existence of Jesus, Gibson didn't hold back. He spoke with conviction, not as someone trying to win an argument, but as someone explaining what he sees as truth. On the other hand, Joe Rogan has always approached religion with curiosity mixed with skepticism. He is not strongly tied to any particular faith. Over the years, he has said things that show he is open to the idea of God, but unsure about organized religion and traditional beliefs. He often questions the accuracy of religious texts and wonders how much of them have been shaped by human influence over time. When it comes to Jesus, Rogan has shown interest in the historical side of things, but he has not clearly stated a firm belief in Jesus as the Son of God. So here is the surprising shock. That difference is exactly what made Gibson speak up. It wasn't about attacking Rogan personally. It was about addressing a bigger issue, the way modern culture often treats Jesus as a myth, a symbol, or just another story. Gibson pushed back against that idea. He pointed to the consistency of biblical accounts, the historical references to Jesus, and the impact Jesus has had on the world for over 2,000 years. For him, those are not small details. They are evidence. The real reason Gibson challenged Rogan then wasn't just about one conversation. Joe Rogan is not just a podcast host anymore. He is one of the most powerful media voices in the world today. Millions of people listen to his show regularly. His platform shapes opinions, introduces ideas, and sometimes even changes the way people think about serious topics like politics, health, and belief systems. Because of that, what Rogan says, or even what he questions, carries weight. If he expresses doubt about something, many listeners begin to question it too. It's also important to understand that Rogan's show is built on conversation, not agreement. Guests are free to share their views, even if those views clash with Rogan's own thinking. That's what happened here. Gibson wasn't trying to silence Rogan or shut down his questions. Instead, he used the opportunity to present a different perspective, one rooted in belief, history, and personal experience. Over the years, Rogan has hosted many people who hold strong religious views, as well as those who reject religion entirely. That balance is part of what makes the show unique, but it also means that ideas about faith are constantly being examined and challenged in front of a huge audience. In that setting, Gibson's voice stood out because it wasn't hesitant. It was direct and confident. Do you think Mel Gibson's view on Jesus is correct? Do you think it was right for him to make it public? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, click on the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it.